Hello everyone, System Chalk here with, I believe, the 12th episode in the story of Harold Davidson in Cultist Simulator. This is actually the third time that I'm trying to record this episode, and I've been having a few technical problems, which hopefully a rather abrupt reset will take care of. I am, however, going to say that there's the slight possibility that I mislabeled, or not mislabeled, but misinterpreted some of the saves here. But it does give me a chance to do a little bit of technical public service. So, for those of you who, for whatever reason, need to revert to an old save, it is actually possible to do inside of this game. If you go to the options menu, now I believe this is a little bit more difficult or impossible to do on mobile, so I apologize to those of you who are playing the game on mobile. I don't have numbers for like the distribution for the the players over the different types. I'd kind of like to know it, but so far as I can tell, Weather Factory hasn't released that information. But if you go under Browse Files on at least a a PC version of, when I say PC, I mean personal computer, not specific. I think, Macs that should have the same folder. If you go inside here, there's going to be your save file, save.txt, but also you will see that there is backup save 1 through 5. So essentially what I did here, I know you can't see it on the screen. This is, I'd rather not rather not subject you to everything that's on my desktop. But essentially, if you click on that Browse Files button, you should see your save as well as some backups. And essentially, if you just relabel one of those saves, or preferably if you duplicate the file and rename it to save.txt, that should take you through. To your the previous state that you were there. So what I did here was I just looked for the first save file that was on a day other than my recording day today. But as always, there's the small danger that I've missed something, and that one of the old files is missing some information. Also, I may not have a good distinction between what I have covered already and what was in one of those lost introductions, but it's been 2 minutes already, so I think we've beaten that to death. I apologize if there are some slips and some otherwise missing detail. Oh yes, other missing details. So the state of the world right now, we are getting ready for Season of Despair, so preferably we don't generate any dread. I've got 2 notoriety, which is currently stuck inside of a painting here. I'm going to use a peculiar rumor in exploration. I think I'd said this is probably in one of the lost episodes, one of the false starts to this particular one, that I couldn't use the peculiar rumor because I had 43 seconds left on the talk. Obviously, you explore with peculiar rumors. It says it right in the text, so I don't think I had said that out loud, but I'll come clean about it and say this was a silly thing that I said. And if none of you heard it, great. But if I did say it previously, I was under a misapprehension. Clearly, the game's writing overrides anything that I have to say here. So I'm not going to quite go all hands on deck for getting erudition. We did get that from a book, and I would like to try and get more erudition from books. But in this case, I will not hold off my studies and use reason. What I am going to do, though, is I will paint with this erudition a bit just to sort of save it, because it does have lantern. It will potentially generate the lantern event that'll generate some more erudition. It might be nice to use something with higher lantern, but honestly, Pope Clifton is still just 2 lantern themselves. So, I suppose you can say, well, you double your lantern, but it's not really going to move the needle one way or the other. So we will read Kittling Ripe and The Moldywarp's Grave and Other Stories, a lusciously illustrated tome of loosely connected children's stories collected by one N.K. Field. Few of them are remotely suitable for children. The protagonist, a speechless cat thing called Kittling Ripe, performs a series of elaborate rites to rescue members of her extended family, culminating in the resurrection of her other grandmother, Moldywarp. Goddess Reward. My recent work has accrued modest fame. My paintings have reviewed well. Okay. Oh, nice. Five funds. Okay, so because I'm going to be generating another notoriety with a peculiar rumor, I'm going to do one more sort of notoriety-based painting. And then once I generate that third notoriety, I'm actually going to start using Mystique only and just let that notoriety sort of die out on its own. So for now, we will preserve the life of the erudition with a mood piece called I Am So Clever, and we'll prove that we're so clever by reading a children's book. And we found the Forgotten Mithraeum, so we'll follow up on the peculiar rumor. I suspect that at the end of this story, I may find someone who will hear what I have to say. And we have an occult scrap in the wood. I could probably go to the wheel or the well or the temple of the wheel. I don't think either of them can generate something like erudition for me. I don't have any benefit from occult scraps right now, except for maybe the potential of using them as an input to get higher level lore. But we'll take the chance to try and get something a little bit better. And more importantly, we'll just get some intelligence on. I should probably at this point remember everything that I can find in here, but I never have a memory for this stuff. So let's try the Temple of the Wheel. All right, a furtive truth, a detail smuggled in from an adjacent narrative. Don't speak where you may be overheard. So we probably have more furtive truths than we really need, but it's hard to complain about a higher level lore. So, in my sleep, I came to the high jagged rock, which is still called the Temple of the Wheel, though the hour called the Wheel is long extinct. Another hand had scratched a secret in the black lantern on its flank. I burned that secret into my memory to preserve for waking, before the velvet came out. Before the velvet came out of the velvet wood depths and erased it. The velvet is jealous of her secrets. All right, we'll pay up for the colors of the night. We've got a little bit of extra cash. I think we'll head back to the wood, but I am going to relocate the Mansis locations sort of down to the area beneath. Come on. I'm going to sort of move that to the area beneath my my verbs. So I'm not very good with my mouse today. Now I pass between the scar-barked trees. The moon passes behind branches, though her fingers remain in my hair. I'm stumbling over roots now. It is tempting to drop to all fours to avoid the low branches. Pale wings move deep in the night. All right. So over time, I'll start adding a few more locations, but I'm not quite... I mean, the Forgotten Mithraeum's not going to be that hard for me to go through, given that I already have Enid at level 5. But I will... I'll just slowly file them in. I'm not in any particular rush because I can still get books from Moorlands, not to mention Oriflammes. Alright, come with me. So we've got a Moth Hanger-On. We've got a Passion and another Mystique. Where were we? So we want to talk about a Watchman's Secret. Again, because we're trying to generate erudition, we will use lantern lore, same way we were using heart before. Talking publicly about the invisible arts will attract attention. Perhaps that's what I want. This is something special. It may provoke a reaction. My recent work is celebrated, my name is known, and my work has done well. Sorry, if you can just excuse me for 1 second. I have a very sneaking suspicion that some of the symptoms that interrupted the recording before are creeping up. So I just want to check something here real quick, and we can go back on to our regularly scheduled program. Okay. My recent work is celebrated. My name is known and my work is done well. Sorry, I know I'm repeating that, but... So, my extra Mystique. The weary detective starting to get surrounded by the clues, but It's not the worst little way of presenting things. No staleness, but we've made a small fortune again, so things are looking up as far as the tithe box are concerned. So I think we're just gonna plow right into the painting again. We may have to deal with. Well, even then, the restlessness generated from the passion wouldn't be the end of the world. But what I am going to do here, because we're 14 seconds away from generating the new notoriety, I'm going to opt for doing an all Mystique painting. So in this case here, we've kind of got enough to sort of keep this buried, and we'll be generating more Mystique over time, but it seems like a nice little way of just kind of getting rid of some of the notoriety early so we don't need to worry about it. So you never know, this might be a living. And where's our erudition? There we go. So a mood piece called I'm So Clever. Which again we've proven by now completing the children's book. When the snake witch killed the stag, Kitling snatched one of its eyes. When the dry witch killed the sow, Kitling stole a cup of its blood. She then took them to the place Moldywarp lay buried, and she took out her hair, and she began to dance. So, in the previous playthrough, and I think there's some value in going over this now. Sometimes it was nice to talk a little bit about the lore and maybe what some of these things might mean. So one of the first things that I would do when reading this, so obviously I've run into this plenty of times having played the game over and over again, but it's sort of nice to sort of say, well, what are my first impressions? Because I've tended to find, especially when I was first trying to solve stuff in the game, I don't exactly want to call it dream logic, but definitely there were sort of hunches that I would have just from sort of the repetition of certain subjects. And being able to kind of take those first impressions and sort of do that mapping, and whether or not you have sort of a notebook with you that you sort of sketch things out, or whether you sit down and really focus, I think there's some value in sort of getting those first impressions, because I think it's a testament to the writing. I also think it's intentional that sort of you take these hunches and you're not just relying on sort of intellectually brute forcing your way through all of the problems, but you're sort of taking these impressions that you get and using them to push forward. So some of the associations that I see here that are maybe tied into things that I've seen before in this game. When the snake witch killed the stag, Kitling snatched one of its eyes. So any references to witch, inevitably you think of the witch and sister, but I don't actually think those they may or may not be relevant. I think there's another reference to heart here that's maybe a bit more clear. But the snake association is definitely one with Knock. Now, when you say snatched one of its eyes, it is worth mentioning that there is a reference here to Sylvia. There's a reference to Sylvia's missing eye when you have Sylvia as an acquaintance, but sometimes a missing eye is just a missing eye. So the best I can say here that it's the snake element that's the clearest reference to Knock. The missing eye would be a moth reference anyway, and of course we already have all the associations with moth, so maybe that's not quite as strong as it could be. But that again, I'm kind of talking about first impressions. They've got when the dry witch killed the sow, Kitling stole a cup of its blood. So in this case here, I see a pretty clear reference to Grail, and this would either be cup of its blood, the bloody cup, but also dry, right? Particularly when you do expeditions to the Lone and Level Sands, you've got two ways of crossing crossing the desert portion of those locations. You can use Forge to sort of give you the tools to allow you to cross, or you use Grail, which is about thirst, desire, want, hunger, those sorts of associations. So to me, I see a Grail reference in here. Then she took them to the place Moldywarp lay buried, and she took out her hair, and she began to dance. Shook out her hair, and she began to dance. So the reference to hair, again, may be a moth association. I do think it's actually specifically the cutting of hair that's important to moth, and that's both in terms of whether you're accessing the wood or something like porter. But then she began to dance, and of course, dance you'd see a reference to heart. So what may be present in this is actually a subtle hint as to summoning the voiceless dead. Because you've got knock, you've got heart, and then the reference in terms of death would be the winter, or just simply the resurrection. On the other hand, that's not the only type of that's not necessarily the only type of sort of raising that you can do. You could also get a risen, and in that case there's no knock component to that. There's the corpse, and in that case it would have to be, I think it's called burgeoning risen. Anyways, there's a moth one which requires moth and winter. Obviously the references to knock and the obviously the reference to knock doesn't mean anything in that particular case. The one drawback that I see to this for me personally is that I don't really know how I satisfy the Grail reference. I don't believe that there is a Grail connection to any kind of, risen dead, voiceless dead, So it's again, like, some of this is loose. It may be, I mean, in total, I think you can use Edge, Moth, or Heart would be the three types of dead that you can bring in. And then, of course, you need the knock for the voiceless dead. So we've got the knock accounted for. We've got Grail accounted for, which isn't related to any of these. We've got the burial, which either refers to the corpse or the winter. And we've got heart in the form of dance. So again, these are loose connections. This is, if this is related to formulas, excuse me, then I would probably say that the closest association would be with summoning the voiceless dead. But it may be that these are other references, and of course it's a text. It could be just referring to other things entirely. But when I see snake, I think knock. This one again, just because there's the cup of blood and dryness, I see that with Grail, and then the dance would be the most clear association that I would see with heart. And given the fact that there's the presence of at least heart and knock, but also the reference to sort of death and resurrection, that's sort of what pointed me towards the voiceless dead, if it has to mean anything that's present within the game. So whether or not, like, I don't think this would be the way that you'd say, this is how you figure out the voiceless dead. But this would be me going from, it's like, okay, based on these first impressions, does this build towards something? And I'd say, well, if I think about it, these references, unless I'm missing a summoning somewhere, but I think I've summoned enough voiceless deads that I'm pretty sure it's a combination of knock, heart, and winter. Definitely, I suppose where those details would lead me to. Also, we have a wood whisper. Lie awake and listen. The wind speaks in the branches. The house cries out in its sleep. These are the roads that chaos ride. Oh, and speak this over a corpse in a rite with a winter influence present, and the corpse will rise. Well, fair enough. Now we've got the the recipe for the whatever the moth risen is. I'm pretty sure it's burgeoning risen. Anyways. Let's carry on. An introduction to the histories. The 17th century mystic and antiquarian Claude Hirschelt describes divergent incidents in 5 major histories. The prologue warns at length of the iniquities of one Julian Cosley, a former colleague who Hirschelt now describes darkly as a worm of worms. It seems Cosley advised Hirschelt early in the writing of this book, but Hirschelt later became suspicious. Some of you may recall that we have some memories of Julian from a few legacies ago. Alright, who did we find from the rumor? Isabet. Isabet has always been most comfortable by moonlight. She has excellent night vision. She is often overlooked in daylight. So another acquaintance. And the question is always, with our explore verb, what do we want to do with it? If we want to seek out new locations, we can send Pope Clifton and hope that we generate the erudition. Or I can spend my money and go to Moorlands. Given that we have a lot of funds, I will go to Moorlands, even though it would be nice to explore with Clifton for the potential erudition. Takes time to sort the gold from the dross, the wheat from the chaff, the blood from the water. If I buy enough books, I'll find something interesting. I've been delighted, by the way, at some of the comments relating to reading and the various habits associated with it. So I could spend money on better paints, or perhaps I could find more exotic pigments. I've been back in the world of nonfiction for a while, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think I'd be better to spend a little more time in the fiction section. So I do want to grow the Church of the Bright Edge, but I know the more I do this, the longer I'm going to need to keep the mystique kicking around. So I will feed this need one more time, but I will need to think about whether or not I want to keep taking these peculiar rumors. This might lead me to someone I need, or it might mean something else entirely. While I was returning to the depths, one appeared in front of my eyes whose mouth was sealed. When I saw them in the great emptiness, I cried out, "I think that last night I met another soul in the wood. I will never recall exactly what we said one to another, but I think that we will recognize each other in the waking world." So, back to the wood. Again, this is pretty much an automatic reflex. Now I pass between the scarbark trees, the moon passes behind branches, though her fingers remain in my hair. I'm stumbling over roots now. It is tempting to drop to all fours to avoid the low branches. Pale wings move deep in the night. I think I forgot to spend money on the paints. Recent work is considered significant. I may yet earn a living from this, but nothing is certain. So I did get at least 1 funds, but I generally don't think of that as a win. It's maintaining, but it's not necessarily delivering too much. Douglas is getting surrounded by the evidence. Okay, let's try and preserve... I think I'll just let some of the mystique... We'll just keep the... I mean, I suppose with that in mind, I should just try and keep the longer-lived mystique around, but we'll bring the old band back together. And as always, we'll paint with the erudition until we need something else. Looks like a season of ambition's coming up, so I do need to think about using the restlessness. So I found something noteworthy. I quite like the Humans of a Gentleman. Okay, back to Moorlands, and we'll see if we can get something good. All right, so we found another acquaintance, so that's going to mean... Oh, silly me. We'll still have enough time with Moorlands, but I got that peculiar rumor and almost didn't follow up on it. It does mean, however, that I'm extending the life of the notoriety, which is not good. All right, Hirschalt identifies blood, silver, design, and the worms as the central axes of each of the histories and claims that the so-called second history is the true one. So another occult scrap. We will move on to The War of the Roads, 1450 to 1580, censored edition. Willis Ford describes the War of the Roads, an event in a history other than our own, in detail. But numerous pages have been removed, the name of the publisher is blacked out, and an ominous slip stapled to the cover explains that Willis Ford has been excised. In the past, a score or more longs were made. They brokered peace with the Forge of Days, long enough to set England on a path of early conquest and eventual destruction. The Forge itself devoured the greatest among them. Okay, fleeting reminiscence, so we're fine as far as the Season of Despair is concerned, although that'll be coming back shortly, and we'll pay for the paints. I could spend money on better paints, or perhaps I could find more exotic pigments. But hungers drive me. Alright, Moorlands has given me a collection of poetry, so we'll auction that off when the time comes, but for now we'll just explore with a peculiar rumor. I suspect that at the end of this story I may find someone who will hear what I have to say. Given that we'll be getting a new notoriety in about 60 seconds, I might use the next painting with notoriety. As yet, I have only the needs and desires of any other mortal, but what stirs in me? Okay, we'll go back to the Temple of the Wheel. A subtle flaw. Laces uncoil, windows swing open, locks move as if programmed. Last night, I came in the wood to the high jagged rock called the Temple of the Wheel. Its flank, patched with black lichen and eye signs, opened like a mouth beneath my hands, and I walked in the whispering space within. The gods who were stone, the first of the hours, are almost all gone now, but here their voices remain. Wheel, flint, tide, the others without names. Okay, back to the wood. Tracking down the rumor and finished. Competent work. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. My recent work is considered notable. I did see an overexposure, so we'll see whether or not I need to worry about that. There's another glimmering to kick around. 2 overexposure. All right. Well, let's... I'll put 1 passion in on this. You never know, this might be a living. And this time we'll paint the restlessness. So restlessness does still have lantern. I always keep forgetting which ones are in restlessness, but heart, grail kind of has to be. Forge, lantern, and moth. So not everything, but a fair quantity. All right, we found Eau Claire. Eau Claire has a scholarly aspect and a morbid streak. So, Winter Follower. Even if you didn't play this game before, you know that's a Winter Follower. All right, again, we'll keep talking about the Watchman's Secret. I could, of course, be inducting all these people into the Church of the Bright Edge, but there's no real reason to do so. We only have 1 vault to be exploring. Right now, I'm really just looking to be generating the mystique that kind of comes from my... I mean, it's helping to cover up the notoriety that I'm generating from bringing people in, from finding them in dreams. So again, we'll avoid the Season of Despair, but that shouldn't be too difficult given that we're painting away the restlessness and we're not really reading a lot of books that would generate dread. I do maybe have to worry a bit about fascination. I don't think Humors of the Gentleman will generate that. Okay, so we've got a Season of Suspicion. Now is the time to be preserving and growing mystique. The royalty of England, according to Willis Ford, became the sovereigns of the leashed flame, destroying or transforming their enemies, conquering Europe, establishing grand cathedrals to St. Spark. The alliance with the Forge begins to take its toll. The last few chapters are missing entirely. So, more furtive truths. And we can read the Humors of a Gentleman. Again, I like this one. So, Samuel Savage's satirical comedy on the intrigues of the ailing but cunning John's son, his mistress Mavelyn, her lover Leo, and the upstart Corvino. By the end of the first act, Mavelyn has revealed a secret door in the walls of the house to Leo, and Corvino has taken to consuming worms. All right, so we are, again, preparing for an investigation with the weary detective. As it happens, a lot of things have lined up to sort of be in my favor anyway. We're generating overexposure, so I'm going to want to do more passion painting anyway. But, you know, again, just maybe avoiding notoriety and doing everything I can to generate some more mystique is probably how I want to handle this. And it may mean that I need to sort of tighten my belt as far as the outlay of funds. So an unpromising address, but a promising resident. And here we have found Victor. Victor is a sly fellow, and he knows an unusual opportunity when he sees it. All right, so let's think about how I want to be using my explore verb. I think I still want to go back to Moorlands. I may send Pope Clifton out if the funds start getting too low. But for now, it takes time to sort the gold from the dross, the wheat from the chaff, the blood from the water. If I not buy enough books, I will find something interesting. And I have not shirked from the day's work. This is work I can be... I'd love to follow up on that peculiar rumor, but we do have an investigation coming up, so maybe now is not the time to... Or did I have... Nah, we'll skip it. Temple of the Wheel. Trembling airs, the toes tap, all is brisk and all is well. In the wood beyond the walls of the mansis, a jagged rock rears like the petrified remains of a dancing giant. I trailed my hand along its flank, over the eye signs and lichen and the crude graffiti of the lesser wood powers, and I felt the thrumming of the wheel, which is past. It is past, but something continues. Okay, I am going to want to use this erudition where I can. We'll keep going with the passion to the wood. And let's see what happened with the painting. So more glimmering I'm probably not going to use. Always happy to take the mystique. Well, I'm actually going to add yet another row to this, I think. So still have the staleness, but that didn't really hurt my didn't really hurt the financial outcome for that. So I'm going to be painting my erudition, but for this I'm going to be using a bit more reason. And it's maybe not the smartest thing to reduce the amount of mystique that I have on the table, but with these sort of older ones, at least this one would have gone anyway, and I do kind of like using all 4 slots. So hopefully with the passion there will be 2 things that happen. Number 1, I'm hoping to get rid of the staleness, but number 2, I'm also hoping that this will result in more mystique being generated. We've got some decent odds here, but again, it would be nice to just let that notoriety sort of get tucked away on its own. So this should have an impact. And we will, I know we're at the 30-minute mark, but especially because I spent time talking about the difficulty of getting the recording in, let's at least finish the humors of a gentleman. Oops. I found something noteworthy. Gartside Sanskrit Reader. I'm trying to remember if that was the book that I failed to pick up in the previous auction. Either way, I'm happy to get that one, and we are still doing okay cash-wise, so we'll head back to Moorlands. And for... oh, my passion got picked up, and I don't see a replacement, so I think I'm just going to have to... eat the missed journey on that one. The play is scabrous and occasionally hilarious. The characters are contrary and capricious. Many of the more resonant lines might well be formula of power disguised in plain sight. So we've got another Watchman's Secret, which we've currently been talking about in our talk verb. I really should have paid attention to how much passion I have out. Okay, this one, if I'm quick enough on the draw, I'll be able to use the passion to go in there. And then as far as the study verb is concerned, I'm going to need to start teaching myself some languages. So I'm going to start with Gildersleeve's Latin grammar. This is because I have 2 books in Latin, but only 1 in Greek, and then we'll sort of work our way up from here. So Gildersleeve's Latin grammar, just what you need to refresh your knowledge of Latin. I recall a certain amount from my school days, but I need to brush up. So as for the rest, the investigation, the pursuits, the rest of that I will take care of in the next episode. One final comment I'll just make. I should be able to get one more recorded tonight, but because of the technical problems and just the hour at which I'm recording, I'm probably going to have to split this into 2 parts. So there should be an episode for Wednesday, but if Thursdays and Fridays episodes are delayed or don't show up, it's just simply because I couldn't find the time to get the rest of them done. I probably should just say that in the next episode, but wanted to get that out of the way because at the very least, if I can't be consistent, I want to try and telegraph ahead of time where there may be problems. As always, thank you very much for watching. I've been delighted by the comments. I know I've been a bit slower in terms of responding to them, but as this game teaches us, time is precious, and sometimes it's difficult to try and balance all of the requirements. But I do thank you for the interactions. If you haven't already, I would love it if you consider subscribing. And as always, you can like the video or comment or do both. All of the interactions do help me get noticed, and it is, in addition to giving me quite a bit of satisfaction, this is something that I am seeing in terms of the measurements. I've noticed that quite a few of you, whether you're regulars or you stop by, I do actually see inside of the metrics, and it's actually rather impressive to see just how much of a difference that it makes. So I never want to take it for granted, and I know it extends the goodbyes and all of that, but I do want to say thank you for it and just let you know that as silly as it is, and as every YouTuber keeps asking people for it, there's a reason for it, it turns out. I was maybe a little surprised, and if you ever want to see the data on that, I'm sure I can try and make it work out, but I'm a very small fish, so I'm sure that there are bigger individuals who do those kinds of videos. I'll see you on Wednesday. Take care.